Every history teacher sold you this idea that the past was some dignified, noble journey of human achievement. It was not. It was thousands of years of people making catastrophically stupid decisions back to back to back. Wars started over wooden buckets, entire empires brought down by house cats, and a military submarine destroyed by its own toilet. These are 32 real historical facts so unbelievably dumb they sound completely made up, but every single one of them actually happened. 1. After getting absolutely wrecked in World War I, France basically said never again and threw a mountain of cash at the Maginot Line, a massive wall of concrete bunkers, underground tunnels, pop-up turrets, and full-on air-conditioned barracks stretching across the entire German border. Think of it like the most expensive home security system ever built, except you left the back door wide open. Because the whole thing just stopped at the Belgian border. Why? French military geniuses were 100% convinced that no tank on Earth could squeeze through the thick Ardennes forest. So when World War II started, the Germans stared at the giant fortress, looked over at the trees and went, "Cool wall, we will just go around it." They drove their entire army through the forest and made the most expensive defensive structure in human history, about as useful as a screen door on a submarine. 2. The defenestration of Prague sounds like some fancy wine tasting event, but the word defenestration literally just means throwing someone out of a window. In 1618, a mob of angry Protestant rebels stormed Prague Castle, grabbed 3 Catholic officials, and instead of doing anything reasonable, they just yeeted all 3 of them out a 3rd-story window. That is a 70-foot drop. By every known law of gravity, those guys should have been done. But somehow, all 3 survived. The Catholic Church immediately called it a miracle, claiming angels floated them gently to the ground like some kind of divine Uberpool. The Protestants had a different theory. The men landed in a gigantic pile of horse manure stacked up in the moat. So basically, a mountain of poop saved 3 lives, started a theological argument, and directly kicked off the 30 Years' War. History is beautiful. 3. Military operations usually involve taking down dictators or securing strategic targets. But Operation Paul Bunyan was the United States bringing the full wrath of the American military to deal with a tree. In 1976, a poplar tree in the Korean demilitarized zone was blocking the view for United Nations observers. American soldiers showed up with pruning tools to trim it, and North Korean guards attacked them. Now, most people would file a complaint. The United States brought 27 helicopters, nuclear-capable B-52 bombers circling overhead, F-111 fighter jets, an entire aircraft carrier battle group parked offshore, and hundreds of combat-ready troops. All of that for a tree. A few guys with chainsaws cut it down while North Korea watched in total silence, probably rethinking every life choice that led to that moment. It is hands down the most aggressive landscaping job in the history of planet Earth. Your HOA could never. 4. Most people think steam power was invented somewhere around the 1700s, but the ancient Greeks actually built a working steam engine in the 1st century AD, and then did absolutely nothing with it, like a gym membership in January. Hero of Alexandria, a Greek engineer, built the Aeolipile, a metal ball that spun at high speed using jets of steam. This was, in every practical sense, the engine that would later power the entire Industrial Revolution. But did the Greeks use it to invent trains or factories and skip humanity ahead 1,700 years? Nope. They used it as a party trick to entertain rich people at dinner and to swing open temple doors for dramatic effect. They had cheap slave labor, so nobody saw the point in automating anything. One of the greatest inventions in human history just sat on a shelf collecting dust for over 1,000 years because the Greeks had the attention span of a goldfish near anything that was not philosophy. 5. Way before the internet made spreading misinformation a full-time hobby, people were falling for the most ridiculous garbage printed on paper. In 1835, the New York Sun published articles claiming an astronomer had aimed a powerful telescope at the moon and discovered life up there. And not just like some moss or bacteria. The articles described entire civilizations of blue-skinned humanoid beings, herds of unicorns, and, I swear on everything, beavers that walked upright on two legs and built little huts with working chimneys. The public ate it up like it was a $2 buffet. Newspaper sales went through the roof, and for weeks, people debated the moon beavers like they were discussing actual peer-reviewed science. When it was finally exposed as a complete fabrication, the newspaper barely said sorry and most readers just shrugged. Proof that if a lie is entertaining enough, people will subscribe to it faster than a Netflix trial. 6. When you want to lock down a border, you build a wall out of stone or steel, right? The British Empire in India said, "What if we used plants?" In the 19th century, to stop people from moving untaxed salt, they built the Inland Customs Line, which was, and I cannot stress this enough, a hedge. Not a cute backyard hedge your dad trims on Saturdays. A 4,000-kilometer monster wall of thorny trees and dense bushes stretching across the entire Indian subcontinent. 12,000 officers were assigned to patrol this thing. Their whole career was guarding a shrub. This living wall was longer than the US-Mexico border and stood for decades, all because the British Empire was so obsessed with salt taxes that they literally split a massive country in half with aggressive gardening to make sure nobody seasoned their rice without corporate approval. 7. In 1986, Cleveland decided it was tired of being the punchline of every joke in America, so they came up with a plan to change their image that immediately became the biggest punchline in Cleveland history. The event was called Balloon Fest, and the idea was to release 1.5 million helium balloons into the sky at once. For about 30 beautiful seconds, it looked like the greatest thing Cleveland had ever done. Then, a cold front pushed the entire balloon cloud right back down onto the city and into Lake Erie like the universe hitting the return to sender button. Balloons shut down the airport runway, caused car accidents by blinding drivers, and sent racehorses into full panic mode. The worst part? The Coast Guard was searching for 2 missing fishermen on the lake, but the water was covered in thousands of colorful balloons that looked exactly like human heads bobbing in the waves. The rescue was a disaster, and the city drowned in lawsuits. Cleveland just cannot catch a break. 8. If you think your local weather app is unreliable, at least it has never forecasted a chance of steak. In 1876, on a perfectly clear, beautiful day in Olympia Springs, Kentucky, chunks of raw red meat just started falling out of the sky onto a farm below. Not a drizzle. A full-on meat rain lasting several minutes, covering fences and the ground in slabs that looked like something off the clearance rack at a butcher shop. But here is where it gets peak Kentucky. Instead of running inside or questioning reality, 2 local guys decided the only logical move was to taste the sky meat. They cooked it up, took a bite, and with full confidence declared it to be either venison or mutton. Scientists later concluded it was most likely vomit ejected mid-flight by a passing flock of vultures. Those 2 gentlemen voluntarily ate recycled buzzard lunch, and were apparently fine with it. If that is not the most American reaction to a crisis, I do not know what is. 9. Psychological warfare has taken many wild forms, but the ancient Persians pulled off the single greatest tactical flex in military history, weaponizing cute cats. At the Battle of Pelusium in 525 BC, Persian King Cambyses II knew Egyptians worshipped cats as sacred animals connected to the goddess Bastet. Hurting one was basically a first-class ticket to divine punishment. So he ordered his soldiers to paint cat images on their shields and, according to multiple accounts, brought actual live cats to the battlefield. The Egyptian archers, absolutely terrified of accidentally hitting a sacred fur baby and catching the wrath of a goddess, just stood there and did nothing. They watched the entire Persian army walk up and destroy them without firing a single arrow. An entire kingdom collapsed because one side loved cats too much to fight. And honestly, every person who has ever rearranged their entire sleeping position to avoid disturbing a cat on their lap completely understands this decision. 10. There are unwritten rules in warfare, and one of them is horses do not capture warships, but 1795 said, "Hold my beer." During the French Revolutionary Wars, a French cavalry regiment spotted the Dutch naval fleet sitting near the island of Texel. The winter had been so insanely cold that the entire sea froze solid, trapping the battleships in thick ice like they were stuck in a parking lot. The French commander saw this absolutely ridiculous window of opportunity and told his horsemen to wrap cloth around the hooves to keep quiet, then just ride across the frozen ocean. The Dutch sailors, who had been preparing exclusively for a normal sea battle, were sound asleep when they woke up surrounded by dudes on horses pointing swords at them. They surrendered without a fight. Horses beat battleships. The ocean froze, and the rules of war went with it. You could not make this up if you tried. 11. Fear-based marketing is nothing new, but one salesman in 19th century Prague took it to a level that would make every modern clickbait advertiser stand up and applaud. A rumor began circulating through the city that a deadly breed of sewer snake had invaded the plumbing and was hiding inside toilet pipes, just waiting to bite people in the most uncomfortable place imaginable. The panic hit immediately. Citizens across Prague collectively decided they were done with indoor plumbing and dragged hygiene standards back to the Middle Ages overnight. When the truth finally came out, it was even worse than the snakes. The entire hoax was cooked up by one guy who sold portable chamber pots. He fabricated a citywide snake crisis from thin air just to move product. This man terrorized a major European capital into pooping in buckets so he could make a few extra dollars. Honestly, that is not just evil. That is entrepreneurship. 12. During the Cold War, the CIA had basically unlimited money and zero adult supervision, and someone in a meeting pitched, "What if we turned a cat into a spy?" and nobody laughed. That idea became Operation Acoustic Kitty, a 5-year, $20 million fever dream. Surgeons implanted a microphone in a cat's ear canal and a radio transmitter at the base of its skull. The plan was to train this furry little secret agent to sit near Soviet diplomats on park benches and eavesdrop on classified conversations. On its very first field mission, they drove the $1 million RoboCat to a park in a van, opened the door, and released America's newest intelligence asset into the wild. The cat immediately walked into traffic and got flattened by a taxi. Game over. $20 million, 5 years of research, and it lasted about 11 seconds. The program was canceled, confirming what literally every cat owner on Earth already knew. Cats do not take orders. Not from you, not from the CIA, not from anybody. 13. Sports fans can be intense, but El Salvador and Honduras looked at soccer hooliganism and said, "What if we made it an international military conflict?" In 1969, tensions between the two nations were already boiling over immigration disputes, and then a series of World Cup qualifying matches turned into full-on fan brawls. After the riots, El Salvador said, "That is it," and launched an actual military invasion, bombing Honduran airfields and rolling troops across the border. This became the Football War. It lasted 100 hours and featured real fighter jet dogfights, artillery strikes, and thousands of casualties. 100 hours. That is roughly 4 days. 4 days of actual warfare because of soccer. It is officially the only confirmed time in history where a series of bad referee calls can be directly linked to the start of a real shooting war. Makes the Super Bowl riots look like a friendly disagreement. 14. Napoleon conquered most of Europe, crushed armies on multiple continents, and completely reshaped the political map of the Western world. And then one afternoon, he got chased into his car by bunnies. To celebrate the Treaty of Tilsit, his chief of staff organized a grand rabbit hunt and bought roughly 3,000 rabbits for the occasion. Critical error: he bought tame farm rabbits instead of wild ones. These little guys had zero fear of humans. When they were released, instead of running away, the rabbits looked at Napoleon and apparently thought, "Oh nice, the food guy is here." Thousands of bunnies charged the Emperor of France like a fluffy tidal wave, climbing his boots, clawing at his jacket, absolutely refusing to back off no matter what he did. The most powerful man on the planet was forced to physically sprint to his carriage and slam the door shut while rabbits reportedly swarmed his entire entourage. It was his most humiliating defeat, and it was delivered by creatures that weigh 3 pounds. 15. Modern political grudges are petty, sure, But let me introduce you to the cadaver synod of the 9th century, the most absolutely unhinged courtroom drama in all of recorded history. Pope Stephen VI hated his predecessor, Pope Formosus, so deeply that death itself was not enough to end the beef. Stephen ordered the 9-month-old decomposing corpse of Formosus to be dug up from its grave, dressed in full papal robes, and propped up on a throne in a courtroom to face trial. A young deacon was forced to stand behind the rotting body and answer questions on its behalf, while Stephen screamed accusations at what was essentially a skeleton in a robe. Naturally, the dead guy was found guilty. They chopped off 3 of his blessing fingers, stripped his vestments, and chucked the body into the river. This man literally put a corpse on trial because he was that mad. Reality TV could never compete with this level of committed pettiness. 16. Wars have been fought over land, over religion, over oil, and in 1325 over a bucket. 2 Italian city-states, Modena and Bologna, went to full-blown war because soldiers from Modena snuck into the center of Bologna and stole a wooden bucket from the town well. Bologna considered this the ultimate disrespect and demanded it back. Modena essentially said, "Come and get it." So Bologna raised an entire army. The resulting battle involved thousands of soldiers and ended with roughly 2,000 people dead, which is an insane amount of bloodshed over something you can buy at Home Depot for $8. Modena won, kept the bucket, and to this day it sits on display in the bell tower of Modena Cathedral, passively taunting Bologna nearly 700 years later. Imagine explaining to someone in the afterlife that you died in the Great Bucket War of 1325. 17. Fad diets are nothing new, but nobody has ever committed to one quite like August Engelhardt, a German nudist who founded an entire religious cult based around coconuts. In the early 1900s, this guy bought an island in the Pacific and started the Order of the Sun, preaching that the coconut was the holy fruit of God because it grew closest to the sun. His pitch was that eating only coconuts would make humans immortal and basically turn them into gods. He actually convinced a handful of people to move to this island, where they spent their days completely naked, eating nothing but coconut and drinking coconut water. Shockingly, instead of achieving eternal godhood, they all started dying of malnutrition and severe sunburns. Engelhardt himself withered down to 66 pounds and was found mentally unstable. Turns out, you cannot become a deity on a single-ingredient diet. But you have to respect the commitment. 18. If anyone ever tells you the 1950s were the good old days, kindly remind them that parents used to let their kids stick their feet into radiation machines at the shoe store for fun. It was called the shoe-fitting fluoroscope, a wooden box installed in high-end shoe shops that blasted X-rays straight through your feet so you could watch your toe bones wiggle in your new loafers. It was marketed as science, but it was really just a sales gimmick that absolutely cooked everyone who used it. Kids would stand on these things for 20 minutes while mom browsed the clearance rack, completely unaware their toes were being microwaved from the inside. The result was a whole generation dealing with radiation burns, messed up bone growth, and increased cancer risks. All because trying on shoes the old-fashioned way, apparently, was not enough excitement for mid-century America. They literally nuked their children's feet so shoes would fit better. The 50s were wild. 19. Australia is famous for its deadly wildlife, but the one time the government officially declared war on an animal, they got absolutely embarrassed by a bird that cannot even fly. In 1932, the Australian military launched the Great Emu War to deal with 20,000 emus destroying farmland. They sent Major Meredith of the Royal Australian Artillery with Lewis machine guns and 10,000 rounds, expecting this to be the easiest victory in military history. The emus said absolutely not. They broke into small, fast-moving squads, used guerrilla tactics like they had read Sun Tzu, and dodged bullets like they were playing a video game on easy mode. After weeks of embarrassing misfires and jammed weapons, the military pulled out. The official report basically admitted that despite dumping thousands of rounds, the birds were mostly fine. The Australian government had to formally accept defeat against a flock of oversized chickens. That is a loss you never live down. 20. The British colonial government in India tried to fix a cobra problem with good old-fashioned capitalism, and the result was so hilariously counterproductive it became an actual economics term. Concerned about the number of venomous cobras in Delhi, they offered a cash bounty for every dead cobra turned in. Simple, logical, effective. Until the locals realized that breeding cobras at home was way easier and way more profitable than actually hunting them. Backyard snake farms started popping up all over the city like Starbucks locations. When the British figured out they were paying for homegrown snakes, they killed the program immediately. The now furious farmers, stuck with thousands of suddenly worthless snakes, did what any rational person would do and released every single one into the streets. Final score: the cobra population roughly tripled. The British spent actual money to make the problem 3 times worse. That is government efficiency at its finest. 21. War is generally a horrific, bloody nightmare, but Lichtenstein treated the Austro-Prussian War of 1866 like a company retreat. They sent out an army of 80 men to guard a mountain pass with orders that basically boiled down to stand there and look busy. They successfully avoided all fighting, most likely spent the whole deployment hiking and enjoying the views, and when the war ended, they marched home. But here is the part that makes this the greatest military story ever told. They left with 80 men, and they came back with 81. They picked up a friend somewhere along the way, either an Austrian officer or just some random Italian guy who thought they seemed fun, and he decided to come along. It is the only military campaign in recorded history that ended with more people than it started with. They went to war and came home with a positive KD ratio on friendship. That is the kind of wholesome incompetence the world needs right now. 22. Draco was an ancient Athenian lawmaker so brutally strict that his name literally gave us the word draconian. But for a guy who wrote the harshest legal code in the ancient world, his death was the most ironic thing imaginable. He visited a theater on the island of Aegina, where a crowd of fans had gathered to celebrate him. In ancient Greece, the way to show appreciation was not clapping or doing the wave. It was physically throwing your hats and cloaks at the person. The crowd loved him so much that they launched an absolute avalanche of heavy woolen garments onto him all at once. By the time his adoring fans dug through the pile, the great lawgiver had suffocated underneath it. Death by fan merchandise. He is the only politician in history to be literally killed by the enthusiasm of his own supporters. 1-star Yelp review for that venue. 23. Before crypto rug pulls and NFT scams, the Dutch had tulip mania of 1637, which still holds the world record for the dumbest financial meltdown in human history. For absolutely no logical reason, the entire country of the Netherlands collectively lost their minds and decided that tulip bulbs were more valuable than houses. At the peak of the craze, a single bulb of a rare variety cost as much as a mansion on the Amsterdam Canal. People sold their homes, emptied their life savings, and traded their livestock just to own a flower that would be dead in a week. They were even trading futures contracts on bulbs that had not grown yet. Eventually, one person had a moment of clarity and said, "Wait, this is literally a plant," and the entire market crashed in a single day. Thousands went bankrupt holding nothing but gardening supplies. It was basically the original crypto winter, except the blockchain was a garden. 24. We all have that one friend who makes terrible decisions after a few drinks, but nobody in history comes close to Thomas Fitzpatrick. In 1956, this New Jersey legend was at a bar in Manhattan, and someone challenged whether he could get from Jersey to that exact bar in 15 minutes. So he left, drove to an airfield, stole a single-engine plane at 3 in the morning, flew it over the city with no lights and no radio, and stuck the landing on the narrow street directly in front of the bar. The cops were amazed but still fined him. 2 years later, he was at a bar again. Someone called the story fake, and Thomas, like a man of pure principle, went out, stole another plane, and did the exact same thing again just to win the argument. Twice. He stole a plane and landed it on a city street twice. This man is the undisputed MVP of drunk decisions executed with fighter pilot precision. Give him a statue. 25. Most dictators obsess over nukes or giant statues of themselves. But Fidel Castro channeled his energy into creating the greatest milk-producing cow in world history, which is a sentence I never thought I would say. He poured insane resources into breeding a single cow named Ubre Blanca to outperform every American cow, and he treated this animal like she was a head of state. She lived in a climate-controlled room with armed guards protecting her from potential assassination, while a team of scientists monitored her around the clock. Castro arranged for soothing music to be played for her daily, and reportedly made personal visits just to hang out and talk to her. When she died, she got full military honors, a statue, and her preserved body was put in a glass museum case. An entire nation's budget redirected because one man was absolutely unhinged about dairy. That cow had better health care than most people on the island. 26. Before the 18th century, the French were convinced potatoes caused leprosy and were only fit for pigs. Growing them was literally illegal in France. Then came Antoine Augustin Parmentier, a man who understood reverse psychology better than any therapist alive today. He convinced the king to let him plant a potato field, then stationed heavily armed royal guards around it during the day. Every peasant who walked by looked at the soldiers and immediately thought, "Whatever they are guarding must be worth a fortune." Then Parmentier pulled the guards away at night. Right on schedule, the locals snuck in, stole the precious potatoes, and started eating them like they had hit the jackpot. This man tricked an entire country into adopting their future national side dish using nothing but fake security and basic human greed. The greatest marketing campaign in the history of food. This guy would have crushed it on Shark Tank. 27. NASA hires literal rocket scientists, the smartest people walking the Earth. And in 1999, they destroyed the Mars Climate Orbiter because two teams could not agree on whether to use inches or centimeters. The Lockheed Martin engineers wrote the navigation software in imperial units, pounds and inches, while the team at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory ran everything in metric, newtons, and meters. Nobody caught it. Nobody double-checked. The spacecraft reached Mars, got completely confused by the conflicting data, and nosedived straight into the atmosphere and burned up on contact. $327 million gone because of the kind of unit conversion error that gets you a C- on a 7th grade math quiz. It is honestly comforting to know that even the people building spacecraft can mess up something you learn in middle school. Nobody is safe from basic math. 28. In 1859, a broke businessman named Joshua Norton completely lost it and declared himself Emperor of the United States. In literally any other city, that gets you a psych evaluation. But San Francisco looked at this man in his raggedy military uniform with gold epaulets and said, "You know what? Sure, Your Majesty." He patrolled the city streets daily, issued official proclamations ordering Congress to dissolve, which honestly half the country would agree with, and lived like this for 21 years. The city played along the entire time. Restaurants gave him free food, theaters reserved him the best seats, and cops saluted him when he walked by. He printed his own money and local businesses actually accepted it. When he died, 30,000 people came to his funeral. He remains the only self-declared monarch in American history, proving that if you commit to a bit hard enough, the whole world will eventually just go along with it. Fake it till you make it, Emperor Edition. 29. In the late 1800s, a South African railway signalman named James Wide lost both legs in a work accident, so he did what anyone would do and hired a baboon to cover his shifts. And this is not a punchline. Jack the Baboon was formerly employed by the Cape Town Railway to operate the heavy signal levers that switched train tracks based on the whistle patterns of incoming locomotives. When railway bosses found out a monkey was running their switch system, they were horrified until they tested Jack and found zero mistakes. He was put on the official payroll at 20 cents a day plus half a bottle of beer per week. Jack worked 9 years straight without a single error, which immediately makes him more reliable than most human employees on the planet. He eventually died of tuberculosis, but his legacy as the most competent, beer-drinking primate in railroad history remains untouched. Honestly, give him Employee of the Decade. 30. German U-boats in World War II were some of the most feared weapons in any ocean, but the U-1206 was taken out of commission by a toilet. In 1945, this submarine was fitted with a brand new high-tech deep-water toilet that let the crew flush while submerged. But the system was so ridiculously overcomplicated that you literally needed a training course to use the bathroom. The captain, apparently deciding he did not need the instructions, used the facility and turned the wrong valve. Instead of flushing waste out, he blasted a high-pressure geyser of seawater and sewage back into the submarine. The water flooded the batteries below the floor and instantly started producing deadly chlorine gas. With no options left, he surfaced right off the coast of Scotland, where Allied planes spotted the sub and bombed it. A state-of-the-art German warship was permanently destroyed because one guy could not figure out how to flush. That captain had to explain this to his commanding officer. Imagine that conversation. 31. If you think modern sports drama is insane, let me introduce you to the 1904 Olympic Marathon in St. Louis, which was less of a race and more of a war crime against athletes. The organizers deliberately withheld water from runners to study purposeful dehydration in 90-degree heat, because apparently the scientific method had no ethics board in 1904. The course was unpaved, dusty roads shared with regular car traffic, and one runner suffered a lung hemorrhage just from breathing. The winner, Thomas Hicks, was basically carried across the finish line while full-on hallucinating because his handlers kept feeding him a cocktail of brandy, raw eggs, and literal rat poison as a performance booster. Another runner got chased over a mile-off course by a pack of feral dogs. The guy who came in fourth was a Cuban mailman who ran in dress shoes, stopped mid-race to eat some rotten apples from an orchard, and then took a nap. He took a nap during an Olympic event. This was the Super Bowl of stupid, and nothing in sports history has ever come close. 32. In 1875, a massive fire broke out in a Dublin whiskey warehouse, and instead of the usual smoke and debris, the streets were flooded with an actual river of burning alcohol. 5,000 barrels exploded open, sending a 6-inch deep tide of flaming whiskey flowing through the city gutters and lanes. A normal population would evacuate. Dublin is not a normal population. Instead of running, crowds of people rushed outside with pots, hats, boots, and anything they could get their hands on to scoop up the free booze flowing past their front doors. The heartbreaking result is that 13 people died that night. But not a single one was killed by the fire or the smoke. Every single casualty was from alcohol poisoning, because they drank the burning, filthy street whiskey until their bodies shut down. 13 people saw a river of flaming, dirty gutter booze and thought, free drinks. It is the most Dublin thing that has ever happened, and that is really saying something. Those were the 32 dumbest moments in all of human history, and I'm going to say something bold. I think we got them all. Every single one. There is not a dumber historical fact out there that we missed. Now I know at least half of you are already typing, "You forgot about something," so go ahead. Prove me wrong. Drop the fact you think should have been on this list, and if it is genuinely dumber than anything we just covered, it goes in the next video. Hit like if your history teacher never told you any of this, and subscribe because we are just getting started.